Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome to my channel where I make cake, cookie, and baking business tip videos. And today I am super excited because I get to collaborate for the very first time with another YouTuber. And her name is Janie's Sweets. I discovered her pretty early on in my YouTube journey. As you guys know, I only started last year, but I really watched a lot of YouTube before that too. And I was super excited when I found her channel because it was very similar to my channel. And it was interesting because when I had seen some of the content that she had created before, it was actually some of the questions that I've answered on my channel as well. And when I watched them, I was like, wow, we see so eye to eye on so many of these cake and baking issues. So without further ado, I will allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, thank you so much, Ashleigh, for having me. My name is Janie. I run a channel called Janie's Sweets where I make cakes and different funny videos on my channel. I also have something called Friday Fixes where I answer business side of the questions, and Ashleigh hit the nail right on the head. We see eye to eye on so many things. So I'm super excited for you to have me here, Ashleigh.
I'm so happy to have you here, and I hope one day when this is all over we can actually get together in person and do an actual fun in-person cake collaboration. But for now, we're gonna work on something that we both kind of brought up had bothered us. And it's so interesting because I feel like when you make cakes yourself, your wedding cake is probably the single most important cake you're going to make for yourself. Birthdays, dime a dozen. So for today, we are going to remake our wedding cakes. Now, this isn't just remaking our wedding cakes for the sake of it, but we're remaking them because we both had things we didn't really like about our wedding cakes. I wanted an over-the-top cake. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I'm into the super glam over-the-top cake look. So this was well before I actually got into making cakes. I think I had made maybe 2 or 3 cakes before this point. So I knew I had to go and order it from somebody else that was way more well-versed in cakes. On top of that, I wanted to make sure that I was ordering it from a space that was close to my wedding venue, which was actually far away from where I lived. I didn't want to have to deal with having to stack or decorate my cake on site on my wedding day. Long story short, I ordered this super elaborate cake. I really felt like the cake decorator knew what I wanted, but then when the cake showed up at the venue and I saw it for the first time, I mean, it was super busy on my wedding day. So was I looking at every detail? Not really, but I did notice that it had elephant skin all over the gold tiers. It's really obvious in this photo here. So I definitely want to redo my cake, and I want to fix those little issues. One thing I am a little bit nervous about is the fact that the sugar flowers were so beautiful. So nailing those is going to be a little bit more challenging, but I think I can fix those other sections. And Janie, what was up with your wedding cake? What was the deal with that?
Yeah, so when we started talking and you told me that you had this elaborate cake, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is awesome, because that was quite the opposite for me. I ended up ordering a cake from a grocery store because it was last minute and all of that. I wanted originally to make my cake, but I was sick leading up to the wedding. So unfortunately I could not, you know, work on a wedding cake. Couldn't work on anything, let alone a whole wedding cake.
Totally.
Yeah, so I ended up ordering just a plain white cake. It had like a gold diamond-y kind of ribbon, and then I had some sugar flowers laying around at the house, and I just kind of popped them on there. Now, nothing was wrong with it. It's a beautiful cake. It's super simple if you're into simple stuff. However, I wanted bling. I wanted it to spin around, hang from the chandelier, and have fireworks coming out of it. So I decided that I'm gonna just remake what I would have wanted as a wedding cake instead.
And I have one little question for you about that. So as we know, our cake styles change all the time. Now, how long ago did you get married?
I got married 3 years ago.
Okay, so has your cake style changed? Like, has your vision from what you originally wanted already changed to what you would want now?
Absolutely. That's a great question, actually. I didn't think of that. So 3 years ago, if I were to make that cake, it would have been over the top. But I think what was really in back then was the hole in the middle of the cake with like the glow, like the LED light inside of it and a rose sticking out. So that would have definitely been in there. I don't think I'm so into that anymore. So I feel like geode, cut out type of cakes were really, really popular back then. So that would have probably been in there. Now I'm probably gonna do something different.
Okay, I'm really excited to see what you are wanting now. I think I'm gonna try and stick as close as I can to my original cake, but I'm so excited to see these creations. So let's get into it.
So this is less of a tutorial and more just me showing you the process that I went through in order to make this cake. Now I'm going to try and make it as closely as possible to the cake that I originally ordered. The only difference really is going to be the fact that there is not going to be a real cake on the top tier. So I actually completed this cake rather casually. Whenever you're working with fake cakes, you can do that because you have the luxury of time. So I'm just taking all of my faux tiers there and I'm covering it with a little bit of Crisco and then I'm adhering all of the fondant to it. And what's great about fake cakes is that you can flip them upside down and you can get them really, really nice and smooth. And if you've watched my channel before, this probably comes as no surprise to you. I am using satin ice fondant. So since one of the things that I was not really happy with on my original wedding cake was the fondant coverage, I'm really making sure to take care to try and smooth out as much as possible. After looking at the cake photos from my wedding, I really tried to rack my brain as to why that happened specifically. Now, to be fair, I really think one part of the issue was that it got put into the fridge. Now, putting cakes that are covered in fondant into the fridge is always a little bit risky. We know this. Now, I sometimes do put my cakes in the fridge that are covered with fondant, but that is because I know that my temperature controls in my house are very solid, and I know that it's not going to sweat out. However, nobody really knew at the venue if those things were going to sweat out or damage the cake at all. So I think this did contribute slightly to it, but it still doesn't explain completely why there's so many different wrinkles and tears. It also appears to me that they might have used a luster dust or some sort of different type of coating for the gold sheen and the pearlescent sheen I noticed later on when I was looking at photos. I'm just going to be using my airbrush today to get an all-over gold color. I get asked this question a lot, whether different airbrushing systems perform differently. Quite frankly, from the ones that I've used, they kind of all perform the same. Now, what does make the difference is the type of coloring that you use, and I personally like to use a Mirror Mist. Now, I really want to make sure that this has a solid, even coating, so I'm going over it twice. Really important that you get that airbrush moving and that you make sure that you wait in between coats so that you don't get little droplets forming on your cake. The whole theme and feel of my wedding was actually not very trendy at all. I wanted punchy colors and lots of sparkle and glam. And actually muted colors and the vintage rustic look was really in during this time. But I wanted to be different, so we're going to go ahead and add some sparkle ribbon all over this cake. To add ribbon to the cake is really easy. All you have to do is steam it, wait a couple seconds so that it's not super slimy, and then you can go ahead and attach it. Now I'm going to start working on the sugar flowers. Now I had big hopes of using wire and floral tape, but I just decided to not use any of that and build the flowers directly on the cake. And I will often do this to save time. I really don't like having to wait for flowers to dry, and since I didn't actually need these flowers to stick out a whole lot, I decided to just place them on the cake and build them up that way. It's a lot faster for me, but definitely one day I will show you guys how to wire flowers and put those types of flowers in your cake because I do feel like that provides a really beautiful ethereal look. So my entire wedding was packed full of real flowers, and I really loved those orchids that were hanging down in those bouquets. And I did request a lot of orchids to be on my cake, but I really actually didn't see too many orchids that were on the cake. In fact, I'm not really sure what you would call the flowers that they chose to make that were on my cake. I did think that they were beautiful, but they weren't what I asked for. In order to attach all of these flowers, I'm just steaming my cake intermittently and then adding the flowers on. Now, if I were making this wedding cake according to something that I would actually want to have for my wedding cake now, I totally would do something way less traditional than this. I would do something way more over the top, and you guys know it would probably be at least 7 tiers, and I think it would be spinning or bubbles coming out of it or something like that. The nice thing about this cake though is it is rather timeless. We do see this type of design over and over again, and I gotta say it does come together relatively quickly as well. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, or if you've seen a few of my cake videos, you know that my go-to flower choice is always this simple rose here. I love using it as filler or as the main flower component on a cake, but I'm also trying to do a lot of tropical flowers as well because my wedding was in the summer and I did want a lot of tropical punches in there. Now we're going to add butterflies. I was obsessed with butterflies. I had this vision that I wanted butterflies to be released at my wedding. That idea was quickly abandoned, but I had butterflies interwoven throughout the whole wedding. I had lots of different ways of incorporating them. One of the ways was I had these super blingy Swarovski crystal butterflies in all of the bouquets and in some of the arrangements as well. And I think that would have looked really, really nice on the cake. Now I just put it on my Christmas tree every year. So here's one of the ways that my husband and I really connect, and that is through music. And we really wanted this on our wedding cake. We were one of those customers, you know, the ones that want everything incorporated into one thing. And I thought I had this super artistic way of incorporating it in my head when I told the cake decorator what I wanted. But when it translated over, I mean, that was a pretty difficult feat to actually have the music standing up in a band around. Super difficult for that to be piped on straight. So I decided to go this route where it's a little bit more subtle. And I've mentioned this in previous videos, when I am trying to incorporate ideas that don't necessarily go together, I like to do it really subtly. And I like to try to make sure it sticks with the same color palette so that the ideas can work together. Now you might be wondering why I'm dusting and painting directly on my cake instead of doing it off in separate pieces. This is really just for expediency. But sometimes with more complicated things, I will do it separately if I'm worried about getting it on the cake. So here is the before. See, we've got some wrinkling happening. We've got some shaky-ish lines, but mostly that ripping is what I wanted to fix. And here is the after. Now let's get into the pricing of this cake. Now this pricing guide is going to look a little bit differently than it normally does. So I'm going to share with you how much I actually paid for this cake, which was $750 Canadian. Now this was quite a few years ago, so at the time, that was actually pretty expensive for a custom cake. But for the redo, I would charge $900 for this cake. And of course, it's in Canadian. Now this cake that I actually remade is a little bit smaller than the cake that I received in the first place. But as we know, the sizing really doesn't change the pricing too much. That price is there because of all of that gold airbrushing and the piping, as well as all of those sugar flowers.
So that was the end of our video. I really hope that you enjoyed looking at my new wedding cake. And I do hope that you go over and check out Janie's cake on her channel, Janie's Sweets. Make sure to subscribe. She has a lot of great content.
Thank you so much, Ashleigh, for having me. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!
And do make sure that you go on over to Janie's channel to check out her redo wedding cake tutorial.